back. Coming up on this week's show, our thoughts on CBS's return to the Champions League. Which is better, the Golazo Show or Zona Futbol? What we think of the European Premier League concept. Scottish football is finally back. MLS may be changing their schedule calendar after all. Plus we have letters from you, the listeners, in our mailbag section. I'm Christopher Harris, aka The Gaffer, joined alongside my co-host Kartik Krishnaiyer. Now Kartik, there's a lot to get to. Actually, this is going to be a fun episode because we've got so much to talk about. And let's start off with the soccer. Start off with the football. From this past week, what was your favourite match or favourite programme that you watched?
It's a good question. I mean, I think the Orlando, North Carolina Courage match, Orlando Pride, North Carolina Courage match, Saturday afternoon, late kickoff, 4 p.m. Local time, late kickoff for American television, right? For national television. Back and forth match. The fall series, both teams really can't win it at this point, but Davinia had some great play. She scored a couple goals for North Carolina. Orlando comes back late. This is Orlando without Alex Morgan. She's obviously on loan now at Spurs. They come back and score a couple of late goals. And it was also, I think it was good because it was on CBS and it was in a probably a better time slot than the 1 p.m. that NWSL has been getting. There was no SEC college football game at 3:30 this week because of the COVID outbreak at the University of Florida. So Florida LSU was postponed, and they had a match in that time period instead, CBS. So although actually I think maybe Florida LSU wasn't going to be on CBS, but anyway, there was no SEC game at that time, and obviously CBS normally shows an SEC game at 3:30. So I thought that was the best game. There were some other good matches this weekend. I mean, I would put Everton Liverpool up there, but I guess I don't want to give it the top spot because of all the other controversy around that match, which maybe we'll get into. Yeah.
So for me, I'm going to cheat on this one, Kartik, because my favorite match from this past week was the first half of AC Milan against Inter. At the San Siro, just a really, really, I mean, the first 45 minutes, just non-stop, exciting, end-to-end action. And the thing that's different about a Serie A is just the quality level. It's at a high level. You've got a blend of players. So you've got a blend of South Americans, the Uruguayans, you've got a blend of some English, some Belgium. It really is...
Eastern European, particularly with
Croatia.
Those two teams, And actually even Napoli, Lazio have a lot of Eastern European players. So
that's true. Yeah, you've got a really great blend of soccer, and with to me, with Matteo Bonetti on the co-commentary, and then Mark Donaldson on the lead commentating. The two of them, I mean, Mark has just incredible set of lungs in terms of just his, not only his volume, but his power, just an explosion. And this was a really exciting game. I mean, in the first half, you thought, okay, this is it. I mean, this is Milan. This could be a massive scoreline here. And just a really entertaining game from start to finish. But Kartik, the second half. So the first half was Milan against Inter. Second half, it was this. Here he goes.
Never ever prejudge a football match. Never think you know. Never think it's over. Never write the script before it's written for you. This was meant to be Bale's game. It was Kane's game. It was Son's game. It was Tottenham's game. Rip all of that up. It's Lanzini's game. It is a 3-3 thriller from nowhere, West Ham. From nowhere. Balbuena with a standard centre-half's header. Sanchez with a peculiar own goal. And then Lanzini with the goal of his dreams. And West Ham have never...
Yeah, and that was, a really incredible second half. But Peter Drury, really at the top of his game once again, just with that poetry. I mean, it is what it is. It's poetry. And, never, ever prejudge a football match. Never think you know. Never think it's over. Never write a script before it's written for you. And I'm sure a lot of listeners, I mean, myself included, I would think, Kartik, you too. Sometimes you watch matches and you go, this match is dead and buried. I mean, 15 minutes in, Spurs are winning 3-0. This game's over. And West Ham looked, out of the game completely.
I'm not sure they looked out of the game completely. I thought actually after halftime they came out and played from minute 40, and actually Drury and Beglin mentioned this in the commentary. From minute 45 to minute 60, they were the better team. Gareth Bale comes on minute 61, I believe, and he has that chance at the end. Kane had a chance, but I actually thought West Ham got back into the match, even though they were down 3-0. They looked very much up for it after halftime, although it must be said that two of the guys that looked really good after halftime were Antonio, who you could tell in the first half, towards the end of the first half, wasn't going to be able to go a full 90. And same thing with Fornals, who was good and then kind of dropped off. I wanted to go back to your first pick, the Milan derby. This also, I have to say, just from a general football standpoint, it was a bit of a shock because I don't have very high expectations for Milan this season. Have exceedingly high expectations for Inter. I've actually even gone on record saying I thought Inter could compete in Europe at the highest level and that they would win Serie A this season. They have not looked good thus far in Serie A. Milan have looked very good. So I expected in this derby things to correct themselves. So, Milan has started well. Inter has started poorly, but it's the derby. Milan hasn't won a derby in several years. They haven't won an away derby in, I think, a decade prior to this. So I expected it to correct itself, and then Zlatan does what Zlatan does in the first 15 minutes. So I actually think this is in terms of when we look at the season in a couple months, this may end up being an exceedingly significant result. That the Milan derby, and and credit to Mark Donaldson. I thought he had a phenomenal call, and I also wanted to mention he and Matteo really good in the studio before the Roma match the next day too, in summarizing everything going on in Serie A. So that team, I think, is really now. This would be year 3 of them together. Is that right?
Sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the chemistry is really, really good between them, and they're outstanding calling matches, and now we're getting them often more than once a week, which is also good.
The one thing about the Milan derby that really kind of set it apart to Kartik, and probably a lot of people missed this, was the referee. The referee let the game flow. I mean, there was fouls happening left, right, and center. The referee was like, "Play on. No foul. Let's keep on going." And you had players, of course, diving and rolling around, but he said, "Nope, come on, keep on." No call, and then magically the players would pop up and start running back towards trying to defend. That helped with the speed of the game, and of course we've had so many stoppages in games and so many stoppages for this, that, and the other. This one was free flowing football from start to finish. Second half was a little bit tense, but going back to that Spurs West Ham game too, in hindsight, I think it's, to me, I don't know, when I was watching this, I was like, okay, West Ham just look completely out of it. David Moyes at the end of the game said, he said, actually, in the first half, I thought we played really well. We were in the game. And I just told him, okay, second half, go out there and do the same. But David Moyes he didn't really coin it, but he described this game as crazy football. And not just this game, but just in terms of soccer in general, after this COVID, once COVID broke, it has been very crazy. Lots of goals, lots of back and forth. Some games boring. I mean, we had the Burnley West Brom game on the Monday, I think, or the Sunday. That was pretty boring. The first goalless goalless draw in the Premier League this season. But overall, I'm enjoying this crazy football, even without the fans. Yes, I would like the fans to be there, but a really entertaining weekend, I think, overall. So, Kartik, that pretty much sums up the weekend games. Of course, you and I watched a ton of other football, whether it was Championship, maybe a little bit of Liga MX, a little bit of more Premier League matches. You watched a bunch of women's soccer, I watched Major League Soccer, etc. But we really have to talk about the Champions League, and the Champions League is back. it's back again, group stage. We've got, of course, CBS Sports and TUDN, and both of them coming in strong, and both of them now having their own Whiparound shows. You've got Zona Futbol, which TUDN's had for 2 years now. And of course, the launch of CBS Sports is the Golazo show, hosted by Nico Cantor. Nico, son of Andres Cantor, the famous Spanish language soccer commentator. And the interesting thing about this is that Nico Cantor was one of the hosts of Zona Futbol on TUDN last season. And as we've talked about a little bit over the summer, there's been layoffs at TUDN and Univision, and actually a lot of broadcasters too. I think ESPN, Fox, NBC. There's been a lot of layoffs in general. But Nico Cantor gets hired to do a Zona Futbol basically for CBS Sports and is based in London. Now, I took the Pepsi Challenge, Kartik, and I watched Zona Futbol on Wednesday for the Champions League matches, and I watched the Golazo Show on Tuesday. I'm not sure if you had a chance to watch either of the shows, but just wanted to get your viewpoints first in terms of kind of pluses and minuses.
Yeah, the Golazo Show on Tuesday, I think it needs some work. I was disappointed in the in kind of the direction of it. Nico Cantor, like his father, very cosmopolitan, knows a lot about football all over the world. In fact, his first announcing gig was with the Fort Lauderdale Strikers. Obviously, I worked for that club, and I worked for the league as well, and worked with Juan Arango. Nico Cantor, I was calling him Andres Cantor. Nico Cantor worked with Juan Arango, who's of course a friend of ours, in the broadcast booth for the Strikers for Fort Lauderdale back in 2011 and 2012, and he's very cosmopolitan, knows a lot about football all over the world, all over Europe, does Copa Libertadores matches, has done Liga MX matches in both English and Spanish, and obviously did Zona Futbol at TUDN, which meant he did Champions League and Europa League. Now, with Alex Scott and Jamie Carragher in the studio with him, it became like the Anglo-American football show. They talked about British and American themes exclusively for the first 20 minutes, it felt like. And their reporters all had Jenny Chu, who obviously worked for Orlando City. They all had kind of this Americanized or anglicized bent. So I guess maybe CBS knows who their audience is. They assume anyone who's interested in German football or Spanish football or Italian football or Dutch football, they're all watching TUDN, and everybody watching them is interested in England and American players. So that would be my first and foremost critique of it. And then after that, I thought the show was really clunky through halftime. Although I'll be honest, I fast forwarded through a lot of it. I was watching during that first half, I was watching Dortmund versus Lazio as my focus on CBS All Access. I had watched Dinamo Kiev and Juventus on TUDN prior to that, so I was watching games actually, not the Whiparound shows as much as maybe I should. Second half, I thought it was better. I think Nico showed his knowledge, able to kind of, and also his ability to move and transition. I thought that was good. I think the analysis was kind of weak. I would actually apply. I know you want to talk about Whiparound shows, but I'm just going to throw this in. I think the analysis on the actual traditional post-match show for CBS was weak also. Kate Abdo and Micah Richards had off days on Tuesday. I do think Roberto Martinez was very, very strong. As of this taping, I have not watched that particular show on Wednesday, so I can't comment on whether they bounce back.
Yeah, so Wednesday's Golazo show had a smaller crew. So it had Nico Cantor and Roberto Martinez. So you had those two together. And of course, Tuesday's show, for anyone who missed it, was Jamie Carragher, Alex Scott, and Nico Cantor. And I don't want to be too hard on CBS Sports, only because this is the very first time they're doing it. This is brand new, and we know. I mean, a lot of the hardcore, long-time listeners know that it's not as easy as it looks. And Multi-Match 90 was on Fox Sports, or usually Fox Soccer Plus, right, or Fox Soccer Match Pass, for a couple of years, and you had Ross Dyer doing that, and as they did more and more of those, they got better and better. It's hard to do live, especially when you have so many games happening at the same time, not knowing what's going to happen and trying to transition in a seamless way where it's a watchable experience. And I think CBS Sports will learn a lot from this week. I think on Tuesday, it seemed very flat. I mean, no energy, just very... In the beginning, it was very quiet. It was strange because, they were kind of listening into the commentary but then started talking, just then started chatting too much. So you had Alex Scott and Jamie Carragher and Nico Canto just talking. We want to watch the games. We want to know what's happening. We want to listen to the commentators. Now... if there's analysis to share it with us. Otherwise, it feels like watching like Fan Zone, where you've got just fans talking over it. We didn't want that. Wednesdays was better than Tuesday, but I think it needs to be less talking and more. One person could do it. 2 people is okay. 3 people is too many. But so far, hopefully they'll learn the lesson a little bit in terms of how to improve it. Nico, it's interesting, Kartik, because you and I have met with TUDN. We've done, I think both you and I have done some pieces, some articles about Zona Futbol. We've been in the studio at Zona Futbol. We've interviewed those guys. We've been big fans for a long time. And I think CBS thought, okay, let's take Nico Canto. He's the star of that show. Let's take him and put him in a English language show similar. Even calling it the Golazo Show sounds like something Nico would come up with, a name that's really exciting, that has a Latin aspect to it. But what you have is a Nico Cantor who is pretty mellow. He was not as kind of excitable, not as passionate, not as lively as we were used to hearing him on TUDN. But the other thing, though, Kartik, and this is a big difference, is that you have Nico talking about the game. It goes to live, say it's PSG against Man United, and most of the commentators on the English language side are pretty mellow. They're laid back, unless you have Mark Donaldson, but he's not doing Champions League. But most of them are mellow, kind of. It's a different style of commentating, completely. So when I watched the Golazo Show, when I watched Zona Futbol on TUDN Extra on Wednesday, I was like, man, this is what I want. Because you have, not only do you have the energy of Alex Berry or Alejandro Berry being the host, but then they go to the commentary and it's Ramsey Sandoval with an incredible goal call, and they're just like going crazy. To me, that is what that type of show should be about. It should be the sheer passion, the excitement, the energy, the raw energy, the emotion. And I get that with Zona Futbol. With the Golazo Show, it's a mismatch. It's taking Nico, who's a good professional, but putting him into a situation where the studio talent around him and the commentators from the games are pretty laid back for the most part. So for me, it's hands down Zona Futbol all the way, even if I don't understand what they're saying. And I guess the other thing too is that one more thing is with Zona Futbol, it has the alert, it has the chime, it has the bell. So if you're watching, even if you don't understand Spanish, and I know a little bit, but enough to get by, I'll hear the bell and immediately I turn my attention 100%. And I'm like, okay, who scored? I want to see, which game it was, what the goal was like, and then hearing the goal calls. To me, that's what the Champions League is all about.
I'm a little, we have to see how this thing plays out, but I was a little underwhelmed by it. But at the same time, I will tell you, I was not terribly interested in European midweek Champions League anyway for various reasons. So, maybe I'm just not as into it as I am into the domestic competitions and into the leagues that are going on that are really heating up. But yeah, I think there are. I think a tendency, because maybe the kind of British surroundings of Nico Contour, then to tone down the way he calls things. At the same time, I thought he was really good in transitioning from one match to another. And again, I was trying to focus on the Dortmund-Lazio match, so I was watching it as my primary focus on Tuesday, which is also part of the problem. So I guess I had anticipated I would like the Whiparound because I'm never focusing on one match anyway. I'm not really that interested in one specific match. But as it turns out, that wasn't the case. I wanted to watch Lazio Dortmund, and the Whiparound show was kind of just extraneous.
Yeah, and that's the thing I was going to say too, is that the Whiparound shows are not for everyone. So, you mean, for those people like myself who have no dog in the race, you mean, I'm not a fan of any of the clubs that are in the Champions League, but I love watching the Champions League. I love the excitement and the storylines and the drama and the high quality football. So for me to watch it, to me, I get the best of. I mean, it's kind of a highlights reel in live in real time. Now, if I was a Dortmund fan, I just want to tune in to watch that Dortmund game or the PSG Man United game and get that full 90 minutes experience with, quality commentators and then even if it's artificial crowd noise piped in, whatever it is, but it's enjoyable by itself. And at the end of the day, really, for CBS, this is really more of almost a showcase. This is almost more of a gateway drug, so to speak, to get people, whether it's mainstream people or people that may not have a dog in the race, watching this and seeing the energy and the excitement and going, holy cow, I should subscribe to CBS All Access and I can have access to each of these games individually, as well as kind of all of the pre-match and the post-match content and Europa League, and have access to all of that, as well as a whole bunch more. So that was the thing I was surprised by on Tuesday, is just that beginning, like the first 15 minutes of the Golazo show was just so flat. It was, I think part of it too is probably Nico and Jamie and Alex trying to find the balance, trying to figure out, okay, do we talk a lot? Do we not talk a lot? What are we doing here? And even though I know that they did rehearsals, I believe on Monday, they watched a whole bunch of Premier League matches from the weekend and queued them up and had them start at the same exact time, and then used that as a test just to see how that worked out. I think it'll get better, and but for me personally, I just really prefer that Zona Futbol side of things. And now CBS, if I want to listen to Clive Tildesley or Peter Drury or Jonathan Pierce or Kevin Keatings, or as well as watching, say, next week's Juventus against Barcelona game or whoever it may be, if I'm interested in one game, I will go to that one game and love it that way. But it depends. Sometimes for me, Kartik, too, sometimes it depends what type of mood I'm in. Am I in the mood to see everything, or am I in the mood just to concentrate on one game? And it is a completely different experience depending on which way you go.
Yeah, so I'm not a Dortmund fan, or I don't claim to be a Dortmund fan, but maybe I am, because I watch them even more closely than I watch Manchester City, the club I claim to follow, or claim to support. So I watch every Dortmund match. So I guess them playing meant that I wanted to watch that match, and they didn't play very well. But I watched the full 90, even if there were concentration lapses, because I was focusing on not Zona Futbol, on Golazo show. And then in terms of Wednesday, I was busy. I didn't get to watch the matches live, but had I been present, I probably would have watched Manchester City Porto and not watched anything else. And in fact, I taped Manchester City Porto from Galavision so I could watch it. And I will watch it before the weekend. Mm-hmm. The Golazo show I taped as well, so I'll check that out. I do want to watch again, like I said, I thought the post-game show, the traditional post-match show on CBS was somewhat weak on Tuesday. Roberto Martinez was very good. I thought that Carragher, Richards, and Abdo were both kind of subpar by their high standard that they set back in August. So I want to watch the Wednesday show to see if they've improved on that. And you mentioned Martinez was with the Golazo show, so that would mean it'd be more of Richards and Carragher and that. For those who don't know, in terms of programming, CBS shows all of these studio shows once again on CBS Sports Network at some point during the evening. So if you set your DVR or you look on your program guide, if you don't want to watch it live or you miss it live on All Access, you can see it again on CBS Sports Network. They've been doing this consistently since they got the rights, so I assume that and they did it, Tuesday and Wednesday this week. I assume they will continue it into the future.
Yeah, pre-match on Tuesday, I enjoyed it. I thought it was good with Mika Richards and Jamie Carragher trading some laughs within the first 5 minutes. It kind of broke the ice a little bit. It was, it's fun to watch the chemistry between them two, and the analysis was fine. I had no problem with that. Wednesday post-match, Kate Abdo again was doing a bunch of the translations. I think Luka Modric was one that she was translating. So really kind of showing her expertise and what she brings to the table. But overall, I thought the analysis that I did see was good. I mean, it wasn't legendary. It wasn't, but it was definitely to me much better than what NBC's doing in terms of the effort there.
Right, that goes without saying.
Right.
Again, I mean, I know people are maybe getting sick of me in particular, and maybe you to a lesser extent beating up on NBC. But yeah, we're holding CBS to the standard they established in August. If we're comparing them to NBC, they're knocking it out of the park, to use a baseball term, every single time they're on air, because you're getting a lot more out of any CBS show than you do out of anything NBC's producing currently.
What I would say, though, too, is that the CBS All Access experience is clunky. And I can't wait until they rebrand it as Paramount Plus and then relaunch the app in early 2021, which could be a few months away, depending on when in early 2021 that is. But it is clunky because you go in and sometimes you see a couple of games listed and then you're like, it's missing 3 or 4. And then I go out of the app and then go back in and then I see them. And then sometimes, you watch a game and you expect then to be able to, like, say, one of the early games, and then you expect to have a continuous flow so that you then see the next game, or you see the kind of the pre-match for the 3 p.m. kickoff on Eastern time. And then sometimes it's a lot of hunting and pecking, and sometimes you have to click 3 or 4 times just to get to what you're trying to get to. I think part of the challenge, Kartik, is that this app was not made for live sports streaming with so many different games on at any given time, or actually at the same time. And I'm sure with the next app release, or the next version of this one, when we do get Paramount Plus and it's renamed, it will be a lot more seamless and will be a lot more. Probably, I don't know, ESPN Plus can be clunky too, but CBS All Access is definitely, you have to have a little bit of patience to get it working.
So a couple of things on this. One, between WhatsApp, Twitter, and text messages, I had 5 different people complained to me that they started a match, whether it was the Dinamo Juve match, which I actually was watching on TUDN, so I didn't have to experience this, or the Chelsea Sevilla match, and they got the wrong match.
Yeah.
At first, so that's one. 2, when I went in to get the Dortmund, the Lazio Dortmund match, because I had watched previously, as I said, I watched the first 2 hours on 2DNA. So I was switching to CBS at that point, 2 hours after the first set of matches. I go into the app. It's very clunky. You're right. It's trying to give me all of the play-in round matches on demand before I can find the live matches.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that's a real red flag. So I normally would have gone berserk about this, but I do realize that they are redoing this app. They are relaunching it as Paramount Plus. Hopefully sooner rather than later. I hope it's during this season in the Champions League. I hope it's not next season. So I'm a little more patient than maybe some of the problems we've seen with Peacock, which is just launched, and other apps when they've been clunky. I mean, Peacock is still very clunky, and it should have been launched without all of these bugs. Where CBS, I realize they're at the kind of end of the lifespan of the interface they've got now, so they're not going to make any significant changes to it until they completely reboot as Paramount Plus, hopefully before the knockout stages of the Champions League. I think if to those of you from CBS who might be listening to this show, I can't stress the importance of that. I'm not saying rush an app that's not totally ready from a development and technology standpoint, but I think the viewer experience will be much improved on Paramount Plus than what you have right now in All Access.
Yeah, the other thing too is that depending on how you experience the app, it's different. So the Roku app is quite different than the web version if you go in on a web browser. And some of the feedback we were getting was some people were having problems with the website version of it. Again, trying to watch a game, but it's not coming up. Or starting a game and it starts with a different game. But yeah, like you said, Kartik, I think a lot of it too is us trying to help the listeners and the viewers and our followers, and just try to, really kind of answer the questions. We've been pointing people to, CBS All Access support, as well as troubleshooting. Same thing with Peacock too. We've had a lot of feedback and questions, and people calling me too, saying like, "Hey, Chris, I'm trying to do this and this and this on Peacock. How do I find it?" And oftentimes one of the best resources is the website is worldsoccertalk.com. We've got FAQs, we've got videos, we've got a really kind of active community with comments, etc. So we try to answer those to the best that we can. And if we can't, we'll go ahead and kind of direct you to support or technical support or troubleshooting. Because sometimes there's so many different things that could be wrong. And it could be on the end user's point of view. It may not necessarily be the app or CBS All Access sometimes.
I'll tell you how bad the Peacock experience is. Now, I've defended NBC for putting matches behind the paywall because they're still giving us an extraordinary number of matches on television, on terrestrial TV. So I thank them for that. But Peacock has become so clunky for me. Usually now when a Premier League match is bumped to Peacock, I decide I'm going to watch, like, for example, the NWSL game I was talking about that I watched start to finish. The Orlando North Carolina match coincided with the Manchester United Newcastle match, which I decided just to skip because Peacock was being clunky. And so I'll watch a Serie A match on ESPN Plus, or a Bundesliga match on ESPN Plus, or a championship match, or Liga MX even in one case this weekend, instead of watching what was on Peacock, because it's just the app. The app I don't think was quite ready, or maybe like CBS All Access, it was not really designed for live sports. It was designed for on-demand movies, on-demand television shows, and other NBC and Universal programming. I get that, but I think that there are some significant issues with the live sports experience, live soccer experience on there.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something I think we've experienced with a lot of different apps too, is that it's a work in progress. I mean, it is something, even ESPN Plus wasn't the greatest in the beginning. It still needs, at some point in the future, I'm sure, I would hope that ESPN would redesign that app and make it better than what it is, to be able to find things.
It's still miles better than these other ones, though.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah.
And they came out of the box much stronger than Peacock did. I mean, it's like yeah, there are still some issues with ESPN Plus. Don't get me wrong. I think I had an issue during one of the Bundesliga matches. It might have been the Schalke Union Berlin match this week, where it just froze on me. Yeah, on Sunday, it just froze on me at one point. But it's still, I don't have any hesitation to go and turn on ESPN Plus for a match. With Peacock, it's like an extra step psychologically in my mind now that I don't want to take. Honestly, so that's not good. Maybe that'll change.
Yeah, for me, it's seamless. I just look at it on the Roku or the Amazon Fire, and they just fire it up, and away it goes. But yeah, work in progress from a lot of different apps there. All right, Kartik. Finally, let's move on to TV streaming news. Finally, this is the news we've been talking about for a long time, and it went live, I think, after we recorded the podcast late last week, but it's finally here.
It's official now because we've known it for a few weeks. The Scottish Premier League Premiership rights were acquired by ESPN Plus, and the Old Firm Derby, which was won by Rangers this time, and I know a lot of people are happy about that. A lot of people are unhappy about it too, but was on ESPN Plus. The first time in a while it's been really accessible to the American public, and I'm curious. And we'll get to TV streaming news a little, TV ratings maybe a little later. But did Rangers Celtic being on ESPN Plus cut into the Merseyside Derby number on NBCSN? Because at least, again, it's anecdotal, but at least based on my Twitter, there were as many people watching that, or maybe not as many, but a significant chunk of people that would normally be watching Everton Liverpool were watching Celtic Rangers.
Yeah, it's hard though too, Kartik, because you can't depend on Twitter. I mean, if you look at Twitter again,
no, that's why I'm saying it's anecdotal.
I know, it's so difficult. I mean, if I had a guess, I think it did cut into it, or it might have actually. You had people watching both games. You had people watching the Merseyside Derby and the Old Firm Derby, or some people have said, "Screw the Merseyside Derby. I'm watching Celtic against Rangers." And the game itself, I think Ian Crocker on the commentary, the thing it was lacking was the crowd noise. And I think in the beginning it was really quiet, really silent, and you had the commentators, of course, and you'd hear the players. But I think as the game went on, I think it sounded like they turned up the volume a little bit on the artificial crowd noise. That was the only thing it was missing. And when I flipped channels, or actually I think I had it on at the same time, when I changed, basically muted the Scottish game and then unmuted Everton against Liverpool, the crowd noise with the artificial noise, it sounded a lot more exciting. It sounded a lot more intimate, and it really kind of pulled me in a lot better than the Old Firm Derby. Having said that, so the news, we broke the news in late August that ESPN Plus had acquired the rights. Then the deal broke down, and then finally it came back with that Old Firm Derby. And the plan is that once a week, the Scottish Premiership, one of the games, will be on ESPN Plus. It's a 1-year deal, and according to one of my sources, once that 1-year deal has ended, then ESPN has the opportunity, possibly, to go ahead and renew that for a few more years. The sticking point is still the clubs, the Celtics, the Rangers, the Aberdeens, the Partick Thistles, etc., the Dundees. The clubs, I think pretty much all of the clubs now have their own streaming packages that they sell directly to consumers worldwide. And that's what ESPN wants. ESPN wants to have exclusive rights to the Scottish Premiership so that every single weekend you can watch every single match from Scotland live on ESPN Plus. They don't want it to be where you can watch a game in two different places. Celtic Rangers, you can watch it on Celtic TV, you can watch it on Rangers TV. Now you can watch it on ESPN Plus. That cuts away at the value proposition that ESPN Plus provides, which is exclusive rights to that league.
Well, so this is interesting because I think you have this issue with iFollow, and do you?
Well, no, it's a little bit different. No, it's a little bit different. So if iFollow, which is the streaming service for the English Football League, for Championship, League 1, League 2. So if you have a game that is, say, for me, I subscribe to Swans TV. I get all of the Swansea home and away games. But any of those games, if it's going to be on ESPN Plus, then that's the only place I can watch it. I can't watch it on Swans TV. Now, that's probably a deal that ESPN Plus would want. They'd probably say, like, hey, we may not be interested in showing every single game from the Premiership, the Scottish Premiership, every single weekend. Perhaps we'd like to have 2 or 3 of them, and those 2 or 3 would be exclusive to them. And maybe there's an iFollow type of situation that the Scottish League can figure out, where those games would only be on ESPN Plus in the States, but any other games that ESPN's not showing could be on that iFollow direct-to-consumer subscription. So there's a lot of things to work out, and that's why we had the hold, and that's why we had the frustration, and that's why we had the delay. But now we know what the situation is, and it's back, and it's going to be exciting to see some of these games on television, on streaming. But there you go. Now, Kartik, oh gosh, where do we start with this one? The European Premier League. I mean, we thought the EPL was English Premier League, but it sounds like the boffins at FIFA supposedly are backing this plan to have 16 to 18 of Europe's top clubs from all the top leagues in Europe, including Liverpool, Manchester United, Arsenal, Chelsea, Spurs, Man City, perhaps, in this European Super League. And there's been lots of reports since it was announced this week whether or not how much credence should be applied to this, because I think a lot of the clubs were saying like, oh yeah, no, there's been discussions, but nothing serious, or we don't know anything about this. That's the type of response we've got so far. We spoke last week in last week's podcast. I think both you and I agreed that we thought that this is disgusting. But any additional thoughts about this whole concept and what they're aiming for?
No additional thoughts other than, if you follow me on Twitter, you can see how disgusted I am by this, and I'm not alone. And it would be, I thought, okay, I guess I do have additional thoughts, because I thought initially upon the news, not surprised, because when Operation Big Picture went down, as we talked about on last week's podcast, I figured that these same clubs would push for this European Super League, which they've been pushing for 15 years. Once again, making an opportunity, taking advantage of this misery and suffering of other clubs and the sport and the world in general because of COVID-19, that they would try and take advantage of the situation. That hunch of mine was correct. However, I said initially maybe that this would be the worst thing ever. To hell with these clubs. Now, honestly, 48 hours later, as we record this, I'm thinking, you know what? Just let them go. Maybe, and maybe the federations will. If FIFA's behind it, then the federations won't be able to kick them out of the federations. But at least put restrictions on them. The way your club, Swansea, you guys can't qualify for Europe from Wales. Things like that. Put some restrictions on these clubs, sanction these clubs, and then maybe we'll have more competitive domestic leagues. Maybe if Juventus and Inter, we're just assuming that these clubs the clubs we're naming are involved in this. The two clubs we know are involved are Manchester United and Liverpool. But maybe if Inter and Juve are out of the Italian league and it'll be more competitive. Maybe the domestic league, and this is where I think some English fans are getting excited. Chris, they're thinking if the 6 clubs we're thinking are involved, might be involved in England, are involved, and it may be 5 and not involving Spurs, right? It may be the other 5 of the big 6. Then good, let them go, and we'll have a competitive league, and we never have to think about these clubs again. That's the attitude of a lot of supporters I'm finding in the last 48 hours, particularly English supporters. I saw German supporters are disgusted by the idea, which is why I'm not sure the German clubs would actually be involved in this. Maybe Bayern would, but the assumption that maybe you would have a Dortmund or a Eintracht Frankfurt's a big club with a big following. Another club in Germany, maybe not, because the supporters may not go for it there. It would be really, really dicey with those supporters. But yeah, I'm disgusted by it. I hate the idea, but maybe if they do it, maybe it'll be better in the long term. Maybe we'll have our football back, to quote John Nicholson.
Well, that's the challenge, though, Kartik, because what you have is that the fans, there's a lot of fans that believe that, that think that it'd be much better to have a Premier League in England where you have, say, Everton competing against Wolves and Southampton and you name it.
Newcastle, yeah.
These clubs outside the top 6 going for the title. The reality, though, Kartik, from a business point of view, is that you take those big 6 out of the Premier League, and then you try to sell those rights to, say, the new Premier League that doesn't include those teams. It's going to be very difficult for, say, I don't know, an NBC to say, like, well, we're not going to pay as much as we did for the Premier League. We'll cut it by, say, by half or by 3/4, because those clubs are not going to generate the amount of fans and viewers that a Liverpool and a Man United and an Arsenal and Chelsea and Spurs and Man City are. That's the reality. It's unfortunate because you and I will watch high quality football no matter who it is that's playing. It's not so much the teams. But those fan bases for Liverpool and Man United, just those two clubs. Well, you take Liverpool, Man United, Chelsea, Man City, and Spurs, and you factor in what percentage of fans of English soccer are fans of those clubs in the United States. I'd say 75%, perhaps.
I think the only club with a huge following that's not one of the top six is Everton.
Right.
Everton has a really big following in the U.S. Maybe West Ham, but more Everton.
But you're left with roughly 25%. So you've lost 75% of your audience, and now you have 25%. And of those 25, and if you still had promotion relegation, you might have some teams coming up, like a Brentford, that has, practically zero fan base in the United States. They will grow, they will prosper, they will do well, but that's the challenge. And I think in many ways, well, actually, going back to this plan, this European Premier League plan.
This is also an effort. Sorry to jump in, Chris, but to prevent the likes of Aston Villa or Newcastle from ever really challenging, because there is a scenario, an alternate world where Villa, Newcastle, and Leeds, those three clubs in particular, given their histories, given the enormity of their supporters' bases, could challenge the top six clubs in England with the right ownership coming in.
Right.
So I think that this is an effort. They know as the value of the Premier League the current Premier League continues to rise, those three clubs will probably, one of them, well, Newcastle almost happened last season, right? Will get the kind of owner that can challenge them. So I think part of the motivation, it's not just COVID and taking advantage of the situation, but they know those other three clubs I mentioned, now Leeds is back in the Premier League, right? Could challenge them someday. So might as well cut that off at the pass, which is why big picture very specifically didn't include those three clubs, right? They added Everton, Southampton, and West Ham as the other three they were going to protect. And now I think they're trying to trying to secede from the league so that those three clubs I mentioned could never threaten them. And I think it's specifically those three clubs are really important when you think about it. And it's not lost upon me that this has happened just as Newcastle was almost sold, just as Leeds has been promoted back to the Premier League, and just as Aston Villa has spent more money in the last couple windows, or net spend at least, than most of these clubs we're talking about. And by the way, Aston Villa is right now the best team in the Premier League. So that might be a coincidence. But they are conscious that Villa could threaten them in the future.
Yeah, and the idea behind this plan, this proposal, the European Premier League, which has fizzled, but it could still come to life, it was that they would double dip. So basically the top, the big six, right, or the big five they talked about, maybe it would become five, but they would also still continue to play in the Premier League. And yet would play in this European Super League. This European Super League would effectively replace the Champions League. And these games would be played, some of the games could be played midweek, some of these games could be played on weekends, but effectively the Premier League clubs and clubs from other leagues too, the top leagues, would be able to double dip and getting more revenue than ever before, because now they're focused on the 16 to 18 European Premier League, which would get enormous amounts of money. They wouldn't have to worry about relegation. They'd probably become permanent members of this European Super League, and then they would still play in the Premier League.
Yeah, they were going to have a 20-year moratorium on relegation, I think. Did we see that in one of the reports?
Yeah, we've seen a bunch of different claims in there. But the other thing about this, which is interesting for our listeners too, Kartik, and for us, and for this podcast, is that going back to the Project Big Picture plan, which was the week before, which was the clubs in the Premier League threatening a breakaway league unless they got their way. One of the things that they wanted was, with Project Big Plan, is the proposal is to be able to go ahead and sell directly to the consumer. So those top six clubs could go ahead and take basically each of them could sell 8 games directly to consumers. So Liverpool, if they wanted to have Liverpool against Everton, Liverpool against Man United, you go down the list, they could pick 8 games and sell those directly to consumers worldwide and take massive amounts, hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue from games like that.
And away from the league,
right?
And away from the broadcasters, right?
Right,
so,
and away from all the other clubs in the Premier League.
Yeah,
right.
And all the other clubs, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is all greed, and we've already seen Manchester City now has a video service called Man City Plus or something, right? I think everybody's doing the Plus now. It's just like all this extraneous content, but they've gotten a lot of supporters. I mean, I'm a supporter of that club, but I'm not paying for it. They've gotten a lot of people to pay for it. So I guess this is kind of they're testing the waters for this. And I think it's also what is really stunning is that I guess Operation Big Picture, whatever it was called, was a trial balloon. If that had floated, great. Then they would have moved forward. But maybe they were floating that out there to now then have an excuse to go forward with this other very, very dangerous thing. Now for the other leagues, I don't know how what Spain is all about protecting the big clubs anyway, right? That's what La Liga and that's what Tebas has been doing. Mm-hmm. I don't know how Italy, France, and Germany are going to view it. I actually potentially think that Liga 1 could really benefit if PSG just left the league, because there's so many good young players that come through their league. That league has become more interesting to me the last few seasons, and PSG winning the title by 30 points. It's just like it bothers me, but it's the rest of the league has become more solid in my mind, and then it becomes very competitive if PSG leaves. Now, I'm not forgetting, of course, that Monaco won the title very recently, but every other year it's been PSG. Germany, that's another question, because if Bayern were to leave the league, you have all sorts of issues with revenue, I think. And global interest, right? Mm-hmm. Because Liga doesn't have the global interest, so I don't know if they take as big a hit if PSG leaves as the Bundesliga would if Bayern leaves in terms of television. Because we spent a lot of time on this show the last year or so talking about the Bundesliga improving as a television product, the accessibility of the league, and also the quality. I think at this point, in my opinion, it's the best league in the world. Although La Liga, obviously, you can make a strong claim La Liga is still better. La Liga has been the best league in the world probably for the last 10 years. But you take Bayern out of it, I think suddenly the quality of the league doesn't dip dramatically, because the reason the league is so good right now is because Dortmund are developing so many good young players. Leipzig have the best scouting network, I think, of any top team in Europe, etc. But it does hurt the media profile of the league. And then, and then the Premier League we've talked about, what would happen to it.
So, Kartik, speaking of the Premier League, so I'm going to ask you a question, and I'm going to ask the listeners too. So imagine we go back in the time machine to the early 1990s, and maybe it's 1990 or 1991, and I say to you, Kartik, what about this idea? What about this idea of taking the first division that's been, the Football League, the way it's been set up since the late 1800s, since 1888, all the way through to 1990, 1991, and I'm going to give you this idea of a breakaway league. It's called the Premier League. It's going to have 22 teams. Eventually going down to 20 teams. It's going to have some. All the games are going to be on television. It's going to have great production. What would you have said at that time? Would you have gone for that idea?
In hindsight, no. Okay, we're going to do two parts of this. In hindsight, no, because I've been very critical of the fact that they haven't spread money down the pyramid and have hammered the Premier League and said, hey, I prefer, as an ideal system, the pre-1992 English system. However, in the interest of being fair, had I been in that position at that time, knowing how unpopular club football was in England, how poorly it was doing on television, and it was a horrible decade, the 1980s, culminating with Hillsborough, right? But Heysel. it was Heysel was in 85. I'm saying culminating with him.
Okay.
Bradford City was in 85. There were a couple other things that happened in 84, 85, and 86, culminated with Hillsborough in 89. I would have been on board with it at the time. There's no question about it, because I think it would have given the just like the closest equivalent to English football in the U.S. is college sports, and just like I thought at the time that the decision to create these power conferences and these television specific packages was good for college football. As it turns out, and we have this debate constantly now, basically the winners and losers in college football were selected around that same time in the early 90s. And if you were a University of Central Florida, which is actually pretty close to where you live, if you were a University of South Florida, you were on the outside looking in. If you were the University of Miami in this state, if you're the University of Miami, University of Florida State, you were in the chosen club. They may all in theory compete in the same sport, but there is a cartel type feel to the way college football operates because of television. Mm-hmm. Very same thing happened with the Premier League and revenue not being shared, revenue not coming down the pyramid. However, in 1991, when David Dean and Lord Sugar, I don't think he was Lord Sugar at the time, but Alan Sugar presented this along with the owners, the chairman at Everton, Liverpool, and Manchester United. Those were the 5 clubs in on it. I probably would have said yes.
Yeah, and as a fan, I probably at that time would have objected to it. As a business person, I would have said this is fantastic. We need this money pumped into the league, into the teams, into the game. And from that point moving forward, I mean, the Premier League would not be, or actually English soccer would not be what it is today if they hadn't decided to do that breakaway league. But looking at this whole European Premier League concept, this Super League, to me, Kartik, what it is at the end of the day, yes, it's about making money, but it's about creating a competitor to the NFL. You have something, it's a closed league. You have something that's, you're talking about more money pumped into these teams, generating massive sums of money. This would really divide, the soccer landscape as far as the haves and the have-nots, and would really diminish the other leagues and other leagues that are not, or there's other teams not participating in this league. But it would really, really make this an NFL size just juggernaut. And I don't think we need it. I don't think it's the right thing to do. I don't think it's democratic. I'm there's probably some things in it that I would probably think, okay, that could be exciting, but it just makes me wonder if, like, say, like 5 years from now, we go back and say, like, if this was 2020, what would you have done? But let's move on, Kartik. Just one more news item, because we've got a lot to get to still, and that is that this came up this week, which is interesting. So we've talked a lot about European football, Champions League, Liga MX, and how exciting things have been. MLS has had probably, really, what I see as probably their worst year ever. They've been hit big time by loss of revenue. I mean, their number one driver of revenue, the thing that keeps this league floating and keeps it thriving, is attendances. And with practically no fans in stadiums, and so many of these clubs just really, really stuck as far as the COVID situation, just like clubs in lower leagues, whether it's League One, League Two, Championship, Second Division around the world, they've been hit too. The leagues that have prospered are the ones that have massive TV deals. So the Bundesliga, La Liga, Premier League, Serie A, teams that are involved in Copa Libertadores, etc., Liga MX. So this came out this week in the LA Times, and they're talking about, it says that, let me go ahead and read it out here. It says, a league official not authorized to speak about internal discussions publicly said that privately MLS may be hesitant to start a new season for 2021 in empty stadiums, since income is its largest source of revenue. The delay would presumably last until a majority of teams were given permission by local health officials to allow spectators back into their stadiums. That could be a while, given the ominous trends in Europe. Spain's La Liga and the Premier League are still playing in empty stadiums, while the Bundesliga, Serie A, and Ligue 1 are playing before limited audiences. So, Kartik, knowing what you know and having the beliefs that you believe, when would the season start? I mean, if MLS is going to wait until the majorities of stadiums will allow fans in.
May, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. That's right. Maybe at this rate. You mean it could be June, it could be July, it could be the summertime, and then you're into Gold Cup, then you're into the Olympics, then you're into Copa America, then you're into players not being available because of international duty and those types of things. I think May's probably optimistic, right? Because you've got the teams.
The Gold Cup presents a major issue for MLS, and they need to solve this long term because as the league has gotten bigger and the CONCACAF region has gotten better and MLS has gotten better, there has been I don't know if there's one tournament in the world that has a league as adversely affected by the number of players that play in it as this tournament with MLS.
Right, now more than ever, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking 50, 60 players from MLS. I mean, in fact, USL and NASL before NASL folded were beginning to get affected by the Gold Cup because there were so many players from the Caribbean and Central America in those leagues also. So, I don't. That's a good point. It's a Gold Cup year, right? So, maybe they wait till the Gold Cup's done, but then that's really late.
Yeah. Then you're starting at the same time as the European leagues. And then you're running into, when you have a stadium that you're sharing with an NFL team, or you're running into other issues, right? I mean, May to me is very optimistic because you look at Canada. The border between the US and Canada is still closed. So you've got your Canadian teams. That adds a whole bunch of even additional complexity to this whole MLS equation. But if you have the majority of teams, if you're waiting until that happens, what about all the California teams that have probably they're tougher in terms of the guidelines there? Florida, we're probably going to be back to pretty full capacity in probably the next couple of months or so at this rate, the way things are heading. So it's a tough situation because MLS needs that ticket revenue. It's going to be, I believe, the last year of their TV deal. So unless they can figure out, they have to have those fans back in the stadium. So it represents a huge issue because it might end up being that you might have a calendar that is a May through January calendar, or it adds a whole bunch of complexity to the way that MLS is set up. But anyway, I wanted to give everyone a heads up about that one. That's the latest news, and that was something that MLS publicly hasn't said anything, but according to sources from the LA Times, they're going through some really tough times right now, trying to figure out what to do for next season, let alone this season, trying to finish this season and trying to figure out a way to, with all these cancellations and postponements. All right, Kartik, for some listeners, they may be happy to know we're skipping the TV ratings section this week. There's so much soccer on streaming, and most of those streaming numbers are not available. So we're going to skip right into listener mailbag. And first up is, this one's for you, Kartik. This one's from Julian Palmer. Julian says, on the spectacular decline of the ESPN FC show with lax analysis, excessive coverage of Manchester United, and Boomer Magoo comedy attempts, my girlfriend texted me after Tuesday night's comic unwillingness to review the Chelsea against Sevilla game, and she said, I don't watch that show anymore. Kartik, do you sense any of Julian's frustrations about some of the things he's noticing, or is it still good?
I think it happens from time to time. There is an obsession with Manchester United. I'll agree with you on that, and of course there's a lot of needling of talent that the talent doesn't the talent hates Manchester United type of thing. But I still think there is there's kind of a complete picture that they give and levels of analysis that other shows don't give. I do think, though, that maybe there are times they gloss over certain matches, and they and in fact I think sometimes it would be like it's like there's so much happening that they've made this very clear commitment to cover the Bundesliga more and to cover Serie A more, since those leagues gravitate to ESPN. That what you see is maybe, or what you hear is particularly Champions League. So the Chelsea, I haven't watched the Tuesday show yet. Monday was the last show I watched, but I could definitely see how maybe the Chelsea-Sevilla game was so uneventful. Dan Thomas and the crew were like, on to the next match.
All right, next up is Chris. Chris says, I'm a regular listener of your podcast, and I have a problem pertaining to the Peacock TV app that maybe other people have dealt with. I've been a premium member since the start of the Premier League season, and the service has worked fine until this week, at which time my Chromecast app on my TV, Samsung Galaxy, can no longer stream any of the Premier League content to my Chromecast. Works fine for everything else on the Peacock app except for Premier League content. Customer service has been a dead end or error messages thus far. Just wondering if you know of a reliable phone number or email address I can contact. Thanks for your time, and I enjoy your podcast. So I don't have a phone number and I don't have an email address, but I do have a couple of things if you haven't tried it yet, Chris, or any other listeners. They've got a really good Twitter account, so they've got a support that seems to be pretty responsive on Twitter. So their Twitter handle is @, of course, and then it's Peacock TV Care, CARE. So Peacock TV Care, all one word. The other thing to do is, if you haven't done it yet, too, is go to peacocktv.com/help. And then in the search bar, type in Contact Us. And then there's a form that pops up, and you can go ahead and just tell them what's happening, and then they'll get back to you. So definitely try those two things. Chris Guardino says, this is the first time that I have seen soccer on pay-per-view on either TV or streaming in a long time. The last time I saw a game on pay-per-view was 15 years ago, the infamous Switzerland against Turkey World Cup qualifier that ended up in a mass brawl afterwards.
Yes, that match. Yes.
Hopefully pay-per-view does not become a trend in soccer because of how expensive it is. I use pay-per-view to watch boxing, and it gets quite expensive when I have to pay $60 to see a world title match. This is often added to a cable satellite bill, which makes cutting the cord much more appealing to people. I would much rather see matches be included in streaming and cable packages because you don't have to pay an additional fee. Going back for a second, Kartik, to talking about the European Premier League and talking about the big picture proposal. That big picture proposal, part of that was pay-per-view. Part of that was saying, okay, hey, if you're a Liverpool fan and you want to watch these 8 games that we're streaming direct to consumer, effectively that's pay-per-view. You're saying, okay, yep. You mean you can watch all the other games on your whichever service would have the Premier League at that time, but if you want to watch the 8 from Liverpool and you're a Liverpool fan, you're paying per match. You're paying directly to Liverpool FC. So I see, unfortunately, I mean, I'm not a big fan of this by any means, but with everything going on, with no fans in the stadium for the most part, and most clubs depending on ticket revenue, and with there not being any relief package, I don't see FIFA coming in and saying, okay, hey guys, we'll help you out. With US Soccer Federation, Kartik, they must be hurting big time without having any Mexican friendlies or US friendlies. No game. I mean, US hasn't played since what? Cup Cam Cake?
Yeah.
You mean in January or early February?
I don't even remember those matches, so there was never the last time they played a really competitive match.
It's been almost a year since they've played a really, really tough match. So I mean, you go across the board. So I see pay-per-view as being a way for clubs and federations and leagues is looking at ways to kind of replace that revenue, because they have bills to pay, they have players to pay, and unfortunately, we the consumer will have to pay for a lot of that stuff. So again, don't be surprised if this happens in the near future, more and more than ever before. 2 more to go. JP says, hopefully the big clubs never get that wish of a breakaway Super League. What makes the Champions League so great is those clubs don't meet often, so it's special when they do. Same for the big rivalries within a league, such as El Clasico, Bayern against Dortmund, the Manchester Derby, Juve against Inter, etc. It's only twice a year, barring any League Cup matchups. If the big clubs created their own league and had these types of matches every week, it would become oversaturated and blasé after a short while. At the same time, it would rob us of more soccer. I think I wrote you guys before comparing it to college basketball. If all the powerhouse schools from each conference formed their own league, it would eventually destroy everything else outside of it. Financially, would also lack charm. There's something special about a Barcelona visiting Eibar or an Ajax, Monaco or Atalanta, surprising everyone with a deep Champions League run. And I agree 100% there, Kartik, right? Yeah, I mean, it's... Agree. Yeah, I mean, rooting for the underdog, and that's part of not just soccer, but just sports in general. I mean, life in general. I mean, rooting for the underdog and getting joy from that, and having a European Super League, it could become boring. Last but not least, this is probably one more for you, Kartik, maybe. John Average Geek says, can you guys give a shout out to the consistency of Louisville City? They've made the conference final yet again, but because Louisville is not a market MLS cares about, Louisville will stay in USL. And I know, Kartik, just from, I think it was, we did a podcast a couple of years ago, and we interviewed Louisville, one of the I think supporters groups there, and that podcast went through the roof as far as the number of people downloading it and retweeting it and listening to it, and it's a really, really, I mean, just a fantastic grassroots club that has a lot of passion, great fan base, a lot of pride in that team, and as far as the pyramid goes, right? I mean, they've been left out. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's other cities too that are like this too.
Yeah. Since 2017, they've been really unstoppable at the second division level. The other thing I would mention is that they are actually technically a relocation of Orlando City, or the Orlando City USL club. That's why their colors are purple, and They originally had some cross ownership. They were actually originally Orlando's affiliate club in USL until Orlando decided to create their own B team. So if you take their history in Orlando from 11 to 14, then you take their history in Louisville from 15 to 20, they have dominated a decade of USL. So quite a club.
Yeah, definitely, and it's something that it's sad because they get lost in the shuffle, right? They're not going to probably get an MLS team, and because it's not a massive major market like a Miami or a Los Angeles.
Now we kind of thought that about Cincinnati, who was their big rival. Cincinnati's a little bigger than Louisville, but I think actually if you look at soccer demographics, Louisville would be a better market to be in if you're MLS. And Cincinnati's attendances were so high, they couldn't say no. And to a certain extent, that was the case with Portland, too. I mean, I remember when Portland got into MLS was looking at Miami first and foremost, Montreal, and at the time, Montreal's owner, Joey Saputo, was not that interested in moving up to MLS, and potentially some other places. They were looking at Vegas then. All of those fell through, and they took Portland along with Vancouver. They never had any intention of taking both of those. I think it would have been Vancouver. They would have left Vancouver and Seattle as a rivalry, and kept Portland, a smaller market, in the second division. So there is still hope for Louisville, and their new stadium is wonderful, and that's a great showcase for USL. That's part of the reason I think USL wanted to play this season in spite of the pandemic, was to showcase the new stadium opening in Louisville. So I still have hope that they can be a first division club, whether it's in MLS, whether it's USL becoming a competing first division with MLS and down the road, or however the pyramid shakes out.
Yeah, that dream is always that promotion and relegation happens in this country, and that teams based on their competitive level can go up or down that table. And Louisville would be in MLS if it was based on that, in terms of just the way that how well they've done and how they play, right? And you've got teams like I don't know, like a Colorado Rapids or this season Atlanta United that probably would get relegated into second division and
LA Galaxy.
Oh my gosh, yeah, don't get me started on that one. Yeah, but so yeah, it's so yeah, John, definitely we're big fans. I mean, it sounds like, I mean, anytime I would go to Louisville, never been there, but I'm sure that it's a great experience to go see a game there, just from everything I've read and seen. So listeners, we want you to have your say. You can always reach us via email through web at worldsoccertalk.com, as well as facebook.com/worldsoccertalk, and on Twitter at worldsoccertalk. Plus, of course, you can always post your comments on worldsoccertalk.com. Kartik, what about this weekend? What do you got planned? Any soccer on the calendar, or are you going to be super busy with politics?
Well, obviously, Man City, West Ham, which I realize is on Peacock, so I guess I'm gonna have to use Peacock. That's how we're gonna start the weekend. Yeah, I'll be able to sneak some football in for sure in terms of the elections. Also, I actually more complications for me this weekend might be that I'm trying to move all my stuff finally out of a storage facility that's been sitting for years. So that's also complicating the weekend. But yeah, I'm looking forward to Chelsea, Manchester United. I think it's a pretty critical game for Chelsea. We've had high expectations. I still don't know, and it's funny. I think I'm more active on Chelsea Twitter now than I am in Man City Twitter, because there's so many selection questions about what Lampard's doing, and similarly Aston Villa playing so well, probably the best team in the league right now. Maybe Aston Villa, besides AC Milan, who we talked about earlier, might be the best team in Europe right now, and Bayern, of course. Bayern's the best team in Europe. But John Terry, the job he's done with the defenders, I see Konsa, I see Tyrone Mings, Target, and Matty Cash, who was a favorite of mine in the championship. Those guys gelling as a unit, I think, has a lot to do with JT. Then you watch Chelsea, and they can't defend at all. You begin to think maybe Chelsea picked the wrong famous former player of that great generation to be the manager. So I'm watching Chelsea Man United.
Well, what about like a partnership? You could have a kind of a Peter Taylor, Brian Clough. You've got a Frank Lampard and John Terry together.
Yeah,
I mean, John focused on the defense.
Adversarial relationship at times, wouldn't they? I can't see those two really getting on. They were in the same team, but personality-wise, temperament-wise, they seem totally different.
Yeah, they do. But I can dream. But that's the thing about you mentioning. You mean the Man City game this weekend against West Ham? For me, I mean, that's a great thing about streaming in general. I mean, there's a lot of things that can be improved for sure. But the ability for me as a fan of a second division club that's in Wales, and I'm based here in Florida, to be able to watch every single game home and away live and have my commentators from my club, or whether you're a Louisville City supporter or no matter what club you support worldwide, for the most part, it's easier now than ever before to be able to actually watch those games, and that I love. So I'm looking forward to watching Swansea City against Bristol City this weekend. I'm probably the only one, but yeah. Anyway, that's a whole other story. Kartik, so heading into a new weekend, lots of football to choose from. What should they do?
Enjoy your football.